Fernando Alonso has always been a feisty character in the F1 paddock, so when Red Bull came after his new team, you knew he would bite back. Red Bull weren't the only team to look at the AMR23 and claim it was theirs though, but we'll get to that later. Alonso was the centre of attention on Thursday's media day at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, so we're going to check out everything he had to say. But let's begin with his blunt rebuttal to Red Bull. The season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix treated us to Fernando Alonso's shocking third-place finish, upsetting the Formula 1 status quo, and apparently sending Mercedes into some kind of introspective meltdown. Red Bull comfortably took first and second, but it was the Aston Martin team who took all the headlines, and it was Alonso who created the best on-track moments. His pass on the inside of Lewis Hamilton at turn 10 was my personal highlight. Going into the race, we were all expecting big things from Aston Martin, but they shocked everyone with just how good they were. Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko was asked about the impact of a man who had been very important in the design of the AMR23, Aston Martin's technical director Dan Fallows. Marko said, "It's true that what Fallows had in his head cannot be erased. Copying the Focus is not prohibited, but can you copy in such detail without having documentation of our car? We had 3 Red Bulls on the podium, only the last one with a different engine," Marko added. If you compare the cars, the Aston Martin is most similar to our Red Bull. There's a reason for that. Not only did Fallows change, but also some other employees, and they obviously have a good memory. Dan Fallows made the move from Red Bull to Mercedes in April of 2022. He headed up the aerodynamics department at Red Bull and would have been involved in everything relating to the car's aero design. What Marko seems to be suggesting is that Dan took everything he'd learnt at Red Bull and used it to replicate the RB18 at Aston Martin, going as far to say that he'd done such a good job of it, he must have taken physical Red Bull property with him as well. Formula 1 teams copy each other all the time. It is legal in the rules of the sport with some restrictions on how you do the copying. But claiming that former team members took designs with them to a new team is a pretty big claim and needs a bit of backing up by Marko. When Helmut Marko was asked about whether they had any evidence to support the copying claims, Marko said, "No, not at all. And that's not meant to be an accusation either. Those are just joking remarks. If you look in the field, the Aston Martin is the car most similar to the Red Bull." Marko clearly realised he'd overstepped a line and tried to backtrack, but he wasn't the only Red Bull team member to claim the AMR23 was a copy of the 2022 Red Bull. Team boss Christian Horner said, "So they've obviously done a good job over the winter. They say imitation is the biggest form of flattery. It's good to see the old car going so well, and I think it's flattering to see the resemblance of that car to ours, so it was great to see the 3 of them on the podium." Max and Checo said similar things as well, but we just can't see it. The 2 cars really aren't as similar as Red Bull are trying to claim they are. This isn't another pink Mercedes situation. Aston Martin haven't completely ripped off another team's design, like they did in 2020. In fact, it looks more like the Alpine than anything else, but both teams are sporting heavily changed cars from 2022, so neither could have copied the other. The comments from Red Bull stink of jealousy and regret that they let Dan Fallows go, when he's obviously very good at his job. He may have joined the team in April 2022, but this car is the first one developed completely under his supervision, and it is a massive improvement over last year's Aston. Like I said earlier, Fernando Alonso isn't afraid to take on a fight when someone comes at him, and that's exactly what he's done. "I don't care about the comments at all," said 2-time champion Alonso during the press day in Jeddah. "I'm focused on my team, but you can clearly see at a glance that there are differences between the 2 cars," the 41-year-old insisted. When asked to point out the main differences between the Red Bull and Aston Martin, Alonso answered, "Visually they are different. An example of this is that Mercedes say that 50% of our car is theirs, and Red Bull say that 50% of the car is theirs. But there can be no more different concepts than those 2. That clearly indicates that neither of the 2 theories is true," he added. I'll come back to the visually different comment in a second, but I thought the unprovoked mention of Mercedes shows something about the feelings of the Aston Martin team at the moment. Aston Martin buys their gearbox, engine and rear suspension from Mercedes, who have spent the last 2 weeks pointing at Aston Martin saying, "Look, that car is basically ours so we can be competitive." From Fernando's statement, I don't think that's gone down too well in the Aston Martin garage. Anyway, back to Alonso saying the Aston and Red Bull are visually different. I have to agree. The aero concept of the bodywork on the AMR23 is very different to Red Bull's. Instead, they've found the same solution to the regulations that Alpine has, something that Fernando went on to point out. To tell you the truth, I would say that the car most similar to ours is the Alpine, with the side pods like that with the tunnels. Both cars have a big slide down the middle of their side pods that starts by the driver's ears and then drops down to the top of the floor. Red Bull side pods look absolutely nothing like that. The front wings look very different as well. Aston has a bulbous wing on the inside of their end plate, and where the nose connects to the wing is very different on both cars. The Red Bull rear wing has a big cut in the middle of the upper plane, which the Aston doesn't. The two cars just aren't similar at all, really. Alonso did have a theory as to why Red Bull and Mercedes have reacted in the way they have, though. Both have been left in disbelief about what Aston Martin has managed. Mercedes apparently met all their development goals, so they weren't even considering a jump in pace like Aston Martin's as a possibility. All the teams struggle with the budget limit now, trying to improve here and there, he explained. So when they see another that improves 2 seconds or a second, they have to look for how it is possible. But in a way, it's good, because it is praise for the work we've done. While F1 teams regularly talk about it taking years to push forward and get near the front of the grid, Aston Martin's dramatic leap forward over one winter has caught many by surprise. Aston Martin should take the copying claims as praise, because if they were still 7th on the grid like they were last year, Mercedes and Red Bull wouldn't care if the AMR23 looked like either of their cars. Alonso thinks the explanation for the Silverstone-based outfit's dramatic progress is simply the passion of its team owner Lawrence Stroll, and an attitude within the squad that is only concerned about success. I think you need to have the vision and ambition of Lawrence Stroll, or our leadership and our management, because the opportunities are there for everybody, the former Alpine driver said. But it seems that only one team is willing to do whatever it takes to win, and I'm proud to be part of this organisation. Despite the team's strong start and Aston Martin having the right mentality, Alonso isn't expecting to pick up another easy podium in Saudi Arabia. Jeddah is a circuit that is predicted to suit the characteristics of the Ferrari car, but Alonso said it's not just his former team that he expects improvement from. I think they're very good at high speed, he said of Ferrari. They were very good on the top speed as well on the streets, so Jeddah probably will be a strong target for Ferrari. Mercedes as well, I expect them to be fast. Alpine, Alfa Romeo are within 3 or 4 tenths. Things can change very quickly from circuit to circuit. So here for us is more of a challenge in Jeddah coming from Bahrain, trying to set the car up here for those different conditions and see if we can be competitive. The reason Aston Martin did so well in Bahrain was that they were able to produce loads of downforce while minimizing their drag. They weren't the quickest in a straight line, but they were lightning in the corners, and their high downforce levels meant they preserved their tyres really well. A fast lap at Jeddah is very dependent on having a high top speed, due to the big straights at the track, so it may not suit Aston Martin as well. They have got a new rear wing for the race though, which will produce less downforce and drag, therefore increasing their top speed. If the team understands their car well, they'll be able to fiddle with the setup and sacrifice some downforce to improve the top speed. Jeddah may be a closer race than Bahrain, but Aston Martin has the tools to perform again. Do you think Alonso is right to tell Red Bull that they're chatting rubbish by claiming Aston Martin copied their car? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and while you're there, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the reaction to the second race of the season. Until then, drive safe and bye for now.